Hey, you guys, Erin here, back with another moon update for you. And I am just going to be flat out honest here from the get-go. This is a very, very interesting full moon. We've got a certain aspect coming off of it, which very well could lead into things like aggressive behavior. And by no means is this aggression coming from the zodiac sign that the full moon is coming through, but rather a particular aspect that is going on between moon and Mars. Okay. And I will go into that in this recording. What I'm going to do for you is I'm going to start by talking about the real qualities and the benefits that we can receive from this full moon, how to work with it, how to really take on the strongest benefits, the strongest qualities that we can from this full moon transit. And then I'm going to pull up the chart and I'm going to show you all kinds of wild things that are going on. I'll show you what's in retrograde. I'll show you this harsh aspect that's going on between moon and Mars, and talk about where some of this aggression may come from. And I'm also going to talk about what parts of our body may be affected with this full moon transit. There's a lot going on with the nervous system, and I'm going to talk about some remedies that could potentially help with that type. The nerves might just be bouncing all over the place, super fiery hot. So I'm going to talk about some potential remedies for that. And I'm also going to mention some gemstones that really resonate well with the energies that we're receiving from the heavens at the time of this full moon. Okay, so again, let's start out by talking about the real qualities of this full moon. First of all, it comes through at, let's see, it peaks at 8:08 p.m. Pacific time on December 7th. That's a Wednesday. So for those of you over in the UK or other parts of the world, this very well could be coming through on December 8th. You might want to check on your location for the exact time that this full moon peaks through. Okay, let's see. This is in the sign of Gemini. 16 degrees Gemini is where this full moon peaks. Now, as with any full moon, this is the peak of a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago when we had a new moon in the sign of Gemini. If you really want to get into detail with what I'm trying to explain here, you can always go back and look at my YouTube video from 2022 when we had the new moon in Gemini. And watch what I talked about there and apply it to what's going on now. Okay, because this is approximately six months ago, we had a new moon in the sign of Gemini. That was the beginning of the growth cycle. Now we're at the full moon in Gemini. This is the peak of that growth cycle. We've all been experiencing this opportunity for growth that is related to the sign of Gemini. Okay, how have you grown in the ways of a Gemini? This is a time to honor that growth. Okay, so this sign of Gemini. Gemini is what we call the mutable air sign. By mutable, what I mean is that this energy is super adaptable. In my opinion, Gemini is the most versatile sign of the entire zodiac. It can be super popular because it's so sociable, can hang out with all different types of people, and it's fascinated by everything. Okay, and that element of air comes in and is really much associated with intellect. Okay, the sign of Gemini is like the student who's always trying to gather the facts and paying attention to the facts and is constantly trying to learn more, that sort of thing. Not only that, but it's ruled by Mercury. Okay, Mercury is what we call the messenger of the gods. Mercury has such an important job. All right, Mercury also rules the sign of Virgo. Okay, so to be clear here, Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. This will help you understand how Mercury works. All right, Mercury is this energy where we're receiving information, whether we're reading a book or looking at social media or watching TV or whatever it is we're doing, our consciousness is receiving information, and it's like Mercury's job to file that information away, like basically put a label on it and file it away somewhere in our consciousness. And when we want to bring that information back out to reiterate it or communicate it, Mercury goes in and finds that label, finds that file, brings it back out for us to communicate. Again, this is the messenger of the gods. Now that sign of Gemini is the sign of the messenger. It's the sign of communication. And as I mentioned, Mercury also rules Virgo. Virgo is very well recognized for its organization skills. Okay, that's because Mercury's got to be organized. When people have a very debilitated Mercury in their natal chart, they have a really hard time, even staying focused or maybe tough communication skills or nervousness even. Mercury has so much influence on our nerves. Sign of Gemini is very, very much has a huge influence on our nervous system. Okay, and I'll get into some of that in a minute here. Okay, so ruled by Mercury. It's the mutable air sign. It is represented by the twins. This is like the sign of duality. Okay, even the glyph, I'll pull up the chart in a minute here and show you the glyph for the sign of Gemini it's basically the Roman numeral for 2. It's the twins. And there can be this tendency to almost feel two ways about something at the same time with this sign of Gemini. It can also be like, I want to go this way and that way at the same time. And again, that the nervous system can kind of be doing that same thing, especially with this full moon. So that's something to be mindful of. But overall, think about how have you grown in these ways? Maybe you've been working on communication skills. Maybe you've been trying to share more information. Maybe you've been trying to build a website. Maybe you've been more active on social media. Sign of Gemini, out of all the signs, I'd say Gemini and Aquarius really are the ones that are associated with social media. Maybe you've been utilizing the benefits of social media. Maybe you've been paying attention to the facts. Personally, I have absolutely zero faith in what is called the independent fact checkers. I think that's kind of a joke personally. I always make sure to do my own research to figure out if what I'm looking at here is the facts. Okay, that's very Gemini energy. And I actually do have a pretty good amount of Gemini energy in my natal chart. I happen to really appreciate this and I really enjoy this energy, especially the excitableness of it. How have you grown in these ways? This is a time to pull out our journals and write down what we're grateful for the growth that's related to this sign. Now, something to keep in mind here, of course, we're all experiencing this full moon in Gemini, but it's also very unique to each and every one of us. And a lot of that has to do with where the sign of Gemini comes through your own natal chart. In fact, I'll pull up the chart right now and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, if you've had a reading with me before, you can go back and look at the recording of your reading. You will see something that looks like this. Okay, this is a chart. We all have a natal chart. And when I'm talking about the houses, what I'm talking about are these things that look like a slice of pie. What you'd want to look for when you're looking at your natal chart is look for the sign of Gemini. Which house this is right here, is that symbol for the sign of Gemini? Which slice of pie does the sign of Gemini come through your own natal chart? If you're using Placidus, you need to see exactly where 16 degrees comes through. But regardless, then all you got to do is find out what the information is that's related to that particular house. Okay, if it's coming through your 10th house and it's coming through your house of career, that's fantastic. If it's coming through your second house, house of money, 7th house, house of relationships, 4th house, house of home, 5th house, house of creativity. There's all these different areas of your life that this could be coming through. Now, again, if you've had a reading with me, you can go do this for yourself. And if you haven't had a reading with me, this is one of the major benefits. You will get the recording and you can always go back and apply the information that I'm providing to you here through these recordings to your own personal life. This is how we really can finely tune the moon magic. But if that's too much for you, it's so perfectly okay. We just take a step back and focus on the energy that we are receiving as a collective here. Okay, so this chart here, this is basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. For those of you who are new to my recordings, I work with geocentric Western astrology. With that said, we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. Okay, now these symbols, which are technically called glyphs, are the symbols for the celestial bodies. Like here's the sun, here's Venus, here's Mercury, here's Pluto, here's Saturn, here's Neptune and Jupiter. Okay, if we go in the wheel just a little ways, these symbols, again, technically called glyphs, are the symbols for the zodiac signs that these things are beaming through onto Earth at the time of this full moon. Okay, so hope that made sense to the people who are new to my recordings. Just follow along as best as you can. All right, so we're going to start with the moon right here. Here's the moon. Here's the symbol for the sign of Gemini. Okay, the moon will be at 16 degrees Gemini. Now, something else I'm going to mention here. This is based on my location. Of course, we're all receiving the full moon at 16 degrees Gemini, but depending on where you are in the world, the moon could be like basically this line that goes across right here. This is representing the horizon. If you live over in the UK, let's see, the moon would be somewhere over here. But regardless, it's still going to be at 16 degrees Gemini. All right, so 16 degrees Gemini, this is actually what we call, it's in the second decan. of that Gemini energy, which actually gives it a little twist of Libra energy as well. And Libra is kind of like this sign of charm. Okay, so this could be, for some people, could be a very opportunistic time for charming the pants off of people and with communication. For some people, not so much. Okay, again, so much depends on your own natal chart, but overall, this could be a charming and sociable energy coming through. Now, when I'm going back to what I mentioned earlier about the aggression, okay, aggressive energy coming through. As we see, again, here's the moon. The moon is right next to Mars, right here. This is Mars. Now, Mars, you may have heard Mars being referred to as the planet of war. This because Mars is the aggressor. Mars is a hot energy. Mars is masculine and dominant, and he can create frustrations, even rage, okay? And they are both at 16 degrees Gemini. They're basically exactly conjunct. They're only 5 minutes away. The minutes are these little numbers right here. But this is literally basically an exact conjunction. That means that the moon, the full moon, and Mars, the aggressor, are blending in together, and we are receiving these energies together. Now, the moon, just taking a step back for a minute here, the moon in and of herself, she rules our emotions and our moods and our intuition. And when she's in her fullest form, these things become heightened. You know, that's where the word lunatic comes from. The moon is Luna. Okay. We know so many mythical stories about werewolves and sort of things coming in, you know, reality when we have a full moon, because that's the moon's energy is so powerful when she's full. And here she is next to the aggressor, blending in with that and coming through the sign of Gemini, which again, Gemini, it really rules or has a huge influence on our nervous system. So not only that, but Mars is in retrograde. Oh my gosh. Okay. When anything's in retrograde, it can almost be more powerful. It's basically, I don't even know if that's necessarily the appropriate word, but it can be, because it's like when we're driving a car forwards, we're driving more gracefully than when we're driving backwards, unless you got some sort of special crazy talent for driving backwards. When we're driving backwards, we have less control. Okay. And here's Mars, the aggressor, driving backwards with a little less control next to the giant full moon. And in the sign of duality, going two different directions at once, the sign that's so much has a huge influence on not only our nervous system, but our mental function and our communication skills. Okay. So that's for some people, depending on how this is hitting your natal chart. And of course, you know, we have human free will and the choices that you're making in life. This could be a very energy of frustration and aggression. Okay. So be very, very mindful of that. It is such a good idea to do your best to stay grounded and centered, and keeping the nervous system in check and keeping the communication in check. I will talk about, again, some herbal remedies that may be helpful for that type of energy. Okay. Now over here, we have the sun at 16 degrees Sagittarius. For those of you who are new to my recordings, anytime we have a full moon, the sun and the moon are at opposite sides of the zodiac. Okay. That's part of why full moons are so incredibly powerful, because of the magnetic polarity that's going on between the two brightest lights in the sky. Okay. This is very strong. And that's why all full moons are so powerful. I mean, it's in part why they're so powerful, but this moon, the sun going through the sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign, which is super optimistic and adventurous and fun. But it's also kind of all over the place. All of this is suggesting it's a very, can be a very difficult time for us to stay focused on the thing that we're going after, the one thing, because that's what Mars wants to do. Mars, if you look at the glyph, he's meant to look like he's ready to penetrate straightforward. But in the sign of Gemini, he can't do that. And then we got the opposite, that the sun in Sagittarius, which wants to go adventure over here and adventure over there in a fiery way. So there's a lot going on here that does not suggest it's easy to stay very grounded. Okay. Hallelujah. We do have Mercury, which is right here coming through 1 degrees Capricorn. Now, this is not necessarily like an exalted placement or anything like that, but for this specific transit, I think it's a good place for Mercury, because again, Mercury I shouldn't say he, Mercury is a hermaphrodite. Mercury is Hermes, okay? But regardless, Mercury, the influence that Mercury has on our mind and our conscious awareness and this very busy character that's going on, Capricorn is a grounded energy. It's stable. It's what we call the cardinal earth sign, which is practical about things. And it's a slow type of energy. Capricorn is like the influencer of slowness, okay? Or one of them anyway. And that can help to slow Mercury down a little bit because, and again, Mercury is such a significant key player in this transit because Mercury rules the sign of Gemini, but this stabilizes Mercury a little bit coming through 1 degree Capricorn. Okay. Now we've also got Venus going through Venus going through Sagittarius, which I personally like that. Like when people are born with Venus in Sagittarius in their natal chart, Venus is the influencer of what we're attracted to, basically. I mean, there's so many other things she's associated with, but has a lot to do with what we love and what we're attracted to. And coming through Sagittarius, she can be this optimistic, like, oh, let's go after that. Oh, let's go after that. And so I like that energy personally. But again, that's not necessarily grounded and stable. The next thing I was going to mention here, this right here, I think this is the last time that I will be talking about Jupiter going through Pisces. Okay. Because Jupiter is about to move out of Pisces, which I'm a little sad about that, but that's okay. Okay, Jupiter going through the sign of Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. Okay, here's Neptune right here. They are both going through the sign of Pisces. This is such a rarity and it's so beautiful. I mean, we definitely experience this throughout the year. Jupiter actually moved forward into Aries and then retrograded back to Pisces. But regardless, we've kind of been feeling this, and what an opportunity for spiritual growth. Pisces is really like recognizes the mystic. Pisces is the one that's got one foot in the spirit realm and the other in the physical, and being ruled that energy of mystical Piscean, sort of floaty energy comes from Neptune. Neptune has so much of an influence on mysticism and spirituality, altered states of consciousness, and Jupiter has so much to do with the compassion that comes through here. This is a very, very powerfully spiritual transit, okay? So much so that there's something to be mentioned here, which I have mentioned so many times before. It's so magical that it becomes delusional. It's so magical that it becomes so disconnected from Earth, and it kind of can make people easily manipulated and become a victim of manipulation. It's like red flag for charlatan, okay? That kind of energy can come through here, especially with both Pisces rulers going through the sign of Pisces. But the real quality of this is that it can, again, really sort of amplify people's spiritual experience here. Okay. And also, I will just say it, this can also influence a strong desire to feel or to be in altered states of consciousness, which I'm certainly not opposed to as long as people are going about it in a healthy way. It can influence addictions, but if we're going about using the altered states of consciousness in a healthy way, this can be beneficial for that. Okay, now the next thing I'll mention here, which I'm just going to briefly touch on, is Saturn going through Aquarius. The only reason I'm going to touch on this so quickly is because I've talked about it so much before. Saturn, he's the discipliner. He brings structure. He brings restrictions and limitations. But what's nice about Saturn is he builds, okay? Saturn has so much to do with the structure of things being built. And the sign of Aquarius is actually the sign of humanitarianism. And it also, what I love about Aquarius is that it's kind of like the rebel, okay? It's a little anti-establishment. It's for the people, okay? And here's Saturn, the one who's bringing discipline. Basically, what I'm seeing here is all these groups of people that are getting together and getting structured to work as humanitarians, like basically these structured groups of people getting together to help other people and not including authoritarian establishments. Okay, that's what I really like about this energy. I'm going to leave that there. Okay, and not only that, but Saturn is harmonizing with this full moon. So that's really nice. I mean, I'll just put this out. Keep the ego in check. And also because this is Mars and Saturn both can have a lot to do with our ego. And it's just, maybe if anything, a good time to kind of like sit on that, like meditate on the growth that you've experienced with your self-confidence. Is it coming through in a healthy way? That would be, especially while the full moon is so bright, that'd be a good time to put a little thought into that. Okay, now also this right here, I'll briefly touch on again, because I've talked so much about it. This right here is the North Node. This is where celestial energy comes in. This right here is Uranus. They're still conjunct. They are still next to each other. The North Node, this is where energy comes into Earth. Uranus is spasmodic. Uranus is very unpredictable, rules over electricity and things that are digital and technological. They're blending together. So then it's like we're receiving an immense amounts of this spasmodic electrical Uranus energy going through the sign of Taurus, which every time I think about this, I just have to giggle because the sign of Taurus is not like this. Taurus wants to be stable and grounded, and it really just can't right now because of what it's getting zapped with. This has such a huge influence on what's been going on with our monetary systems, inflation. This also the sign of Taurus really kind of rules over our monetary systems, our banking systems, our money, and our material possessions. Taurus also has a very large influence on our agricultural systems, our soil, our crops, our farm animals. And all of these things, money, crops, farms, all of them are going through these dramatic changes. I do think that eventually there will be a good result coming out of this, but as of now, things are a little wild in those areas. Okay, not only that, but those are in conjunct with the sun. So to be able to see the qualities, the potential qualities coming through of this transit may be very difficult to see in the days surrounding this full moon. This right here is the South Node going through the sign of Scorpio. The South Node is where energy goes out. Personally, again, I'm a Sagittarius rising. I always try and focus on the positive. I always try to find the qualities of what's going on. South Node going through the sign of Scorpio. It brings in an ability to release toxic energy. Okay, the sign of Scorpio. I love the sign of Scorpio. This is my sister sign, and this is my jam. I love the sign of Scorpio. I love its fierceness and intenseness, and it feels things to the core. And I just love that. But it does have a lot to do with like sort of toxic energies. It's ruled by Pluto and Mars. Pluto is considered to be the ruler of the underworld. Okay, the sign of Scorpio could be very much associated with even things like jealousy, things that are unhealthy. Okay, and the South Node is where celestial energy goes out. And this is giving an ability for not only us as individuals to flush out toxicity, and I mean that not on just on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level and on a mental level, to flush these things out, but also as a collective. We're seeing things, and I'm going to get a little woo-woo here for a moment, but seeing things like dark forces being pulled out, in my opinion. They're also being revealed. That's Pluto over here going through the sign of Capricorn. Man, things are going to get really interesting next year when Pluto gets to 29 degrees Capricorn early next year, 2023, because Capricorn rules the structure of our civilization and also influences authoritarian establishments, things like government. And Pluto reveals the secrets. Pluto, he's the destroyer. He's there to destroy, to bring a more powerful rebirth. He's one of Scorpio's rulers, but regardless, we're seeing some things being revealed that are very much associated with dark forces. And this South Node going through Scorpio is kind of providing an ability to pull the toxic dark forces out. Okay, I hope it all made sense. This is going to be a little bit longer than the usual recording, I think. Okay, now let's go into let's talk about the parts of the body that could be very much affected with this full moon transit. First of all, as I keep mentioning, the nervous system. Really, it's like like if Gemini's up here, Sagittarius down here, the polarity between these two has a massive influence on not only our afferent nerves, but also our efferent nerves, the entire nervous system. And then with that full moon conjunct Mars, the nerves could be kind of bouncing all over the place, okay? Especially if you're lacking earth, the element of earth in your natal chart, okay? It's a really good idea to keep as grounded as possible. I already mentioned that, but literally touching our feet to bare earth. Personally, I think it's best to not do this on grass, but rather just sand or dirt or even a puddle of water. Bare minimum 10 minutes a day. Between my readings, every day between my readings, I always go outside and give myself at least 5 to 10 minutes to touch earth, put my bare feet on earth to get grounded. Okay. And this kind of a transit is a really good idea for really utilizing that. But also some herbs that I like to, of course, I'm not a physician. I'm not a licensed doctor. So, check in with your doctor or whatever you need to do. But from my experience and from my teachings, my favorite teachers in the world have told me that these are kind of like ancient remedies. And I'm going to refer to oats or oat straw, milky oats, that sort of thing can be really good for the nervous system. There's so many things you can do for the nervous system. Maybe just do your research yourself. Of course, be careful about it and maybe check in with your healthcare practitioner. But also even something like Damiana. Okay, Damiana is it's a Venetian herb, which Venus can, when I say Venetian, I'm referring to Venus. Venus can almost be like a remedy for anything. She's just so soothing. Okay. And that Damiana can be very good for the nervous system. It can also be used as an aphrodisiac. So you might want to be a little careful there, but it's something that I have, for example, when my dog passed away years ago and my nervous system was all over the place, she actually got hit by a car. I took advantage of Damiana and it really seemed to help the nervous system a lot. If there's a lot going on there with nervousness, you can also check out things like CBD, all kinds of things for the nervous system. Just realize that things might be a little extra out of whack at the time of this full moon, or hours leading up to this full moon is when it's most potent. Okay, now I was also going to mention Gemini rules the lungs. It also rules the hands and the arms. I don't know if you've noticed, but I talk with my hands a lot. I do have quite a bit of Gemini energy in my natal chart, and I think that's why I talk with my hands so much. But so, maybe that's something that's going on for you. But it also does rule the lungs, the upper part of the lungs. Something like Molin could be really good for kind of soothing the lungs. There's also something called, elecampane. Elecampane. These things can be used as a tincture or a tea. You can even smoke the Molin, can be good for kind of keeping the lungs in check. Okay. Again, everybody's got their own individual body. And so of course, do your research and again, check in with your, whoever you got to check in with before. I'm somebody who's very experimental. I've definitely tried all different types of things. I've found that some things work and some things that don't, and I've never hurt myself. So that's just my experience. Okay. So some stones that resonate well with this celestial energy, really like the stone, the dedicated stone to the sign of Gemini is agate. Any kind of agate could be really nice. But I will say that like this right here, this is my favorite kind of agate. This is called blue lace agate, and it is gorgeous and it's super soothing, super calming. Okay. I love, in fact, I even have a little tiny piece right here too. Blue lace agate is such a lovely calming stone. There's also I do have one right here. This is red agate. Red agate is wonderful for stimulation, like stimulating things. Anything that's red is going to stimulate things. If you're in a red room, it's going to stimulate things. And considering that this full moon is conjunct Mars, I don't know if red agate is the most ideal, but there's green agate. There's so many different types of agate and they're very affordable. So that would be in fact, here's a green piece of agate right here. Look at that. So, any of these could be kind of like good for helping, except for the red, can be good for kind of soothing the nerves. Probably the blue lace agate would be the best for calming the nerves. But what I recommend doing is taking these stones and putting them on top of your journal. As I mentioned this in every recording, and I'm sorry if it's too repetitive for you, but taking the stones and putting them on top of the journal. As you guys know, every single new moon and full moon, and even times in between, I pull out my journal and I write down, when it's a new moon, I write down what I'm trying to manifest, because that's the beginning of the growth cycle. When it's a full moon, I write down what I'm grateful for, the growth that I'm grateful for. Then I take these stones and I put them on top of my journal in the hours leading up to this full moon, so that stones are resonating with the celestial energies. Okay, now also some other stones, let's see. Oh, citrine, this is a good one. Citrine is a really good stone that very much resonates with the sign of Gemini. It's kind of a little bit of a spunky type of energy that can come from citrine. It's not very protective though. It's not a very protective stone. Again, if you want something like protection, the blue lace agate can help with that, but personally, I really like black tourmaline. There's also green tourmaline. Do I have that around here? I do. This is green tourmaline, dark green tourmaline. I love this. Anything green, be mindful of, especially green emerald around the time of this full moon. That can make the nervous system really kind of go wild. I mean, this is a protective piece of green stone, but the sort of like, oh boy, really shiny green stones, especially green emerald, can make things go a little haywire. So be mindful of that. One more stone I'll mention here. This right here is labradorite, which is not necessarily totally associated with the sign of Gemini, but it is a really good stone for communication. Okay, really good stone for sitting with if you're trying to, meditate on your communication skills and that sort of thing. As usual, I will leave a full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign of Gemini, either in the comment section. Now you'll find it, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find the list of Gemini stones in the description below. Okay, so I will leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please go to erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. If you're on a phone or like a tablet or something, there's 3 little bars up on the top of my website. If you click, that's a menu bar. If you click there, it will drop down. It'll say book online, and everything's super simple from there. Okay, you guys, I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.